Hey, hey, hey. Oh, I need to scoot back. That's what it is. I feel like that light was too bright. Okay, I think we're good. All right, I'm all set up. So, uh-oh. All right. Well, hello, hello. I'm Lady K or Lady Kendall, and I'm really just here to, tell my story about, making sense of motherhood and all of that. I am, I'm just trying to fix this. I have been like really working on this. I just can't believe how challenging it has been just to get this story out. But I started over on Instagram, trying to put my story out and everything, and all the videos kept crashing, kept getting, disappeared, couldn't find them, um, and my story is kind of exhausting. I feel like when I start telling it and I start getting, it feels good to get it off my chest, but still it's like I want to publish this, but I keep like having to go over it, keep having to keep re-saying it, and like each time it's like a little bit different, like there's different like details that I want to focus on, and ugh. But anyway, so that's why I've decided to come and bring it to YouTube, just because I want to grow my YouTube anyway. So hopefully I can just direct that traffic over here to my YouTube channel, and then this whole video will be here, and it won't be just chopped up in different places, and I won't have to worry about it crashing and redoing it and yada yada. Okay, so I had my story divided into three sections. So like the first part of my story, started before me with the women who came before me and the women who raised me. And then the second part of that story is where like right before, like as I grew up into, a woman myself, and just kind of like the in between phases right before I became a mother. And then the third part is where, I mean, I would like to continue on and pick up on is the very beginning of motherhood. And I don't even know if Instagram has been able to hear me because I had the music on. Anyway, so and then part three, it has to do with what was I going to say? Yeah, just being a mother in and of itself, just motherhood and moving on. So I guess I can back up a little bit to part one, and in that part I talk about how my parents' marriage, it ended shortly after having me, and my mother became ill with lupus, and because of that, and because of like the divorce, and because she got ill and got sick and everything, we never really bonded. I actually spent a good chunk of my life believing that, she didn't like me. And I had a hard time with that fact. But anyway, so, after that divorce, my dad, quickly rebounded with another woman, and they moved away. And my mother gave me to my dad, just relinquished and just said, "You take her." So I did. I left and moved away and lived with my dad and his person, and okay. See, like Instagram, I'm live on Instagram right now and it just cut off. So that's so weird. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that alone. So where was I? So then that's like where life really, pretty much started is, that's as far as I remember. I was 3 years old and, started a new life and everything. But, my stepmom did not like my biological mom. They hated each other. So anytime like my mom would call or anytime my dad would talk about my mom or anything that happened between those two was always a huge fight. Like it was a cat fight. And my stepmom was Latina and, my biological mom was Black. So there was that whole thing in there too, just because like my dad had this whole thing where he just doesn't like Black women anymore. So with that said, through the years, my formative years, you know, my stepmom was very like mentally abusive, if you will. And she spent a lot of time downing Black women. She spent a lot of time talking horribly of my mother. She wanted to make sure that like anything that I had to remember of my mother was bad. And it's like this isn't a part of the story that I really want to dwell in. It's just that I need to paint the picture of people understanding that my story, like the women in my family were like didn't like each other. They didn't support each other. So, fast forward and everything. What else can I say? I don't want to get repetitive because I know that sometimes like when you get to telling your story and you get to a part that you really feel like you really want to, you really want to stay on it. But that's something that, I don't want to do. I just want to keep the ball moving. So, fast forward a little bit, I didn't see my mother much off and on. She had her life. I had my life living with my dad and everything. But her lupus, her illness, got worse, and she ended up having kidney failure. And, so many years later, she ended up passing away due to the kidney failure and the lupus. Like her health she was terminally ill, basically. And when I was 11 years old, she passed away. Now, when this happened, I really wasn't allowed to really mourn her. Just because like the people in my household didn't like her. They had, and, my family didn't really step in to support. No one really cared that this 11-year-old just lost their mother. It was more or less like my stepmom was the type to be like, well, I'm here, so it shouldn't matter. And, as an adult now, I look back and I say that because I didn't have that relationship with her is what made her passing that much worse. So I was forced to just move on with my life. I really wasn't allowed to have pictures of her. I wasn't really allowed to talk of her. Like nobody, mainly my stepmom, just didn't want to hear of it. I don't know why, but my mother was like a big threat to my stepmom, even in her death. It was like a competition over, I don't even know what the competition was, but there was just a lot of animosity between my stepmom and my mom. And, my stepmom used to talk really down to me, just used to tell me just how, ugly I was until she came along and just, horrible things about how Black women can't grow hair and just how, Black women are, ugly and they're bitter and just their men don't want, like just all these things. And, my father never really said anything about it. I mean, he just, my dad was he was there. I mean, I was in his household, but he was very like emotionally distant. So that's pretty much where part one is. Oh, and then also I have to say that about 5 years after my mother passed, my dad and his then wife, they parted, and she ended up ghosting us one day. Like we just came home, and I mean, it was kind of coming just because their relationship was dysfunctional and bad the whole time anyway, just full of aggression and just it just wasn't a good thing. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, they ended up parting. She ended up ghosting us one day, was just came home, all her stuff was gone, she was just gone. And I never spoke to her again. And that was when I was about 15, maybe between 14 and 16. I can't exactly remember how old I was. But yeah, just one day it was like we used to fight a lot. That's all we did was fight. But yeah, like I said, I came home from school one day and never spoke to her, never saw her ever again. So, and she had been in my life for about 13 years. So, and I had been praying for it to end, for things to be just done. Um, it was like an answered prayer, her leaving. And I always say that, sure, she taught me a lot in this life. There's a lot of things that I know and I do because of the way she taught me. But it came with a hefty price. And it was my self-esteem. It was my confidence. It was, my pride. Everything that she gave to me and did to me was very underhanded, very backhanded. It's like the true definition of a narcissistic individual. And even if she were here, I can even still hear her in my mind saying that, you weren't shit before me. You wouldn't have anything to this day if it weren't for me. You didn't know nothing. You're a thief. You're a brat. I still hear it to this day. So, that kind of gives you like the background. And like some of the women that I was talking to say that, yeah, for sure, motherhood is hard whenever you didn't even have a good example yourself. So that's what, I go through there. Okay. So then moving into part 2 of this, kind of briefly roll through it, was that, I was raised to be, an independent woman. And, it was just don't ask anybody for anything, do you, and that's what I was. I went to school, I got a degree, I graduated, I had my own home, I had a car, I had a decent job, making decent money, and I just did my thing. And I thought that I had made it, but it was odd when no one was happy for me. And I come from that time where it was like, sure, you got all that, but where your man at? Like, where's your man? And I come from a time where and I was in a circle back then of women, mostly religious, that their whole worth, their whole everything was tied to a man, having a man, keeping your man happy. And even like back in those days, but that during this time period, just to give you like a what's the word I'm looking for? A vision, like a visual of like what was going on, was that, like that's when Steve Harvey came out with his book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. So now I think of that book as complete BS, bullshit. But back then it was something that I was following. My grandma even got me the book. So yeah, so I came from that, where it just like didn't matter how, like, so anyway, so like the being the independent type of I'm getting a phone call. Hello. Hello.
Hey girlie, what are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing a live video.
Right now? Oh my god, okay, bye.
No, it's okay. What do you need?
Oh, I was just saying what you're doing right now. If you wanted to hang out, I was Seiji.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah? Alright, I'm swinging by.
Okay.
Alright, see you soon.
All right.
Bye.
One of my mom friends. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I'm back. But anyway, hold on. So I wanted to make videos of this myself so that I could like edit all this out and everything. But when I did that, I got so perfectionist where I was like, no, not that part. No, not this part. Oh, take that out. And it's really like, just tell the damn story. Like, have any of you really just got up and just told your story of your life? And it's not easy. Like I'm working on building a healing business and everything. And I work very closely with my spirit guides, and I'm all about meditation and everything. And I've been like hitting like a roadblock. And, I asked, my higher self and my spirit guides, like, what's going on? And I was directed to start telling my story. And they said that through that, I will find my path and I'll find my way. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I just didn't realize how challenging it is. Like I said, like I grew up without any emotional support. It was all about just be smart, go to school, do your thing. What do you need? What's wrong with your tablet? Okay, give me a hug. I'm trying to do something. And it's also hard to do things without interruptions. um, but anyway, and it's interesting, you see that nowadays it's like Black women are like the most educated and whatnot. And like, that's kind of like what I grew up under, was that it was like, that's all you needed was this education just to take care of yourself. Make sure you can do it. Make sure no, you don't need nobody and everything. So that's what I did. And it kind of left me open. And then also keep in mind, because of, I didn't have any like female woman support. I didn't have any confidence. I didn't have any self-esteem. So, and then when I had this degree and I was independent, to still have people say, you ain't shit because you don't have no man, like that crushed me. So it left me in a state, like a vulnerable state of mind, to be like searching and looking for this thing, this love, whatever, in different men. And it left me to be just pretty much used, abused, and cheated on repeatedly over and over and over again. And I internalized it. And I thought that, dang, like maybe if I paid all the bills, maybe if I, like I was to the point where like on my TV, like I bought a flat screen TV and, I had the whole package, the whole, back in the day, it was, I think they still have it. I've got rid of cable, but the full like 1,000 channel, thing, like you could come to my house, have your boys over. You could, please go, honey, please go. No, we're not going to do that right now. Like you could have all your boys over, all the sports, everything's at my house, it's to the point where I was buying all the groceries. Like I put the whole weight of the world on my shoulders, just trying to show that I can be a wife, that I can be this. But I was doing it. I know that now, but I was doing it for all the wrong reasons, for all the wrong people. And, I felt like if I just looked better, if I, did my nails all the time, if I, got my butt bigger, if I, all these different things that I just kept doing because I needed that approval of, I don't even know what. It's funny, like so many years later, looking back, like what was it that you were like looking for? What void were you trying to fill? But anyway, I run into, my children's father. And for him, it was like he stayed home or he came home, I guess you could say, and he had a decent job. So for me, that was gold. So, same thing, made sure that he was happy, had the flat screen, had the cable, made sure he had food, made sure I was cooking, cleaning, doing all these things. And then, then we have our first child. And then that brings me to part 3. So everything before this, I was trying to upload to Instagram, but it kept crashing and messing up and everything. And even through this video, you see all the interruptions and things that come through, but I got through it. Hopefully that gives you like a good like background. So part one, no female support. Part two, you see how the shaky foundation of that and me just searching for fulfillment outside of myself. And now you see part three of me coming in to motherhood. Okay. And this is where I'm most passionate about, is because like my healing business and the healing circles and things that I'm getting together, is that this is who I want to target, mothers, because I am a behavior therapist and I work with, parents who have special needs children, and I work with families and things and a lot. And the thing that I found over the years is that everyone blames the mother. I mean, even when you go back to Freud and, back into school, into psychology, everything is the mother's fault. Everything. Everybody blames the mother for everything. And especially like in today. Anyway, let me get back to the story. So I have, the first, and, in Instagram, I ended it by saying that this is where the independent woman kind of came back to bite me, is because, I had my job going and everything, and I got put on bed rest at like 25 weeks. The doctor was just like, you're going way too hard. You're putting your child's life at risk and your life at risk by, doing this. You can't keep working. And I was in a position where it's like, I can't afford life unless I'm working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And so that's when I went to, the girl's father and said, all right, and this is all backwards, I already know, but it was like, okay, so we're going to have to figure out how we're going to divide this up, just because like I can only work part-time. The doctor wanted me on full bed rest, but he put me down to part-time and said that if you have any problems, it's full bed rest. And I was only halfway through the pregnancy. And I really did I had baby fever. I wanted a family so much. I had like this strong instinct to be a mother. I wanted to be a family woman so bad. And it's going to be funny when, like, later on, when I get into figuring out and learning why white feminism is so bad. Like, through this is when I learned that you ain't no conservative white woman. Like, their struggle is not your struggle. Like, you guys have different struggles. And this is where I learned that right here. Anyway, so I went to their dad and was like, okay, let's work this out. And his response was welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, the system basically. And there's so much I want to say about that, so much that I want to say. But it's like back then we weren't necessarily woke or conscious or anything, but that's just how it was, is that it's like as a Black woman, you go to the Black man and the Black man is telling you, go back to the white man. That's kind of like how it ends up being. What do you need, honey? Can I open the window? No, honey, no. Just go look at your tablet, okay? It's quiet time, okay? Man, she hears anytime I'm on a live video, like she wasn't doing nothing until like anyway. So where was I? I think it's funny I choose a time to do this when nobody's gonna be on here. But anyway, where was I? So that's kind of how it happened, where it was like, okay, so I got all plugged into the system, and he just taught me how to do it. And it was pretty much how his mother was. And this isn't to down anybody or to put anybody's business out there and everything, but, it was like, anyway, so I went and I did what I had to do so that, I had to, because I was put on bed rest. And then, things went okay. And then I ended up, having, my oldest, as you see, coming in and out of the room. And, because I didn't have, like, the way my insurance was set up, this is back before Obamacare, where, or the Affordable Health Care Act, where they said that you had to cover maternity. So where I worked didn't have maternity. And they didn't have like any policies in place. Like it was a right to work state. So they didn't have to guarantee you anything. So there was no maternity leave. It was basically you had to quit and then rehire if they had space for you if the position was still open. I mean, and I had a good relationship with the people I was working for, but that's what I ended up having to do. Like, on one hand, it was good just because I didn't have to stick to that 6 week thing, where 6 weeks and you come back. But then on the other side, it was bad because of like job security. Like, I sat there for those 6 weeks, like, oh my God, are they going to have a spot for me when I come back? Okay. So, and at this time, I was in the middle of my master's degree. So, if you're hearing me tell this story, it was basically the independent woman, me alone, about to have this baby. Why, if you can paint this picture, why the dad just hung out with the big screen TV, watching his sports, eating up the food stamp money, and just being a good man by coming home and, working his little job. And I don't mean that in a bitter way, but if that's the picture you're painting, that's what it was. And then there was me, trying to figure out everything. Like, how am I going to, figure all this out? So, I mean, the thing is that I went back after, it was like between 8 and 10 weeks, and I still didn't necessarily feel good to go back to work, but I ended up going back. But one thing that I do want to like tap into is that, like, that the motherhood piece of becoming a mom was that, they tell you, to help with postpartum depression and anxiety and all the issues that women go through, is that they say, okay, delegate reach out to people. That's the biggest thing they say, is that, ask so-and-so for help. Let people know, like, open your mouth and say something if you need help with these children. Like, that's something that the nurses, that's what they all tell you. So that's what I did. Like, I got home and I was like, all right, I need you to do this. I need this, and then da. And the response that I got met with was, I had 6 kids by myself. Ain't nobody help me. Okay. Another response that I would get would be like, I didn't need no man to be doing all this. Okay. And I like, back in part 1 of my story, like, I didn't have that motherhood bond. I didn't have that. So I wanted what was best for my child. Like, I wanted to, just being in the field that I was, like, learning that it's important to watch what you're feeding them. And I wanted what was best. So I wanted to breastfeed and, I wanted to do things naturally. And I got met with, what you doing that for? What you doing that for? Like, you can go get WIC and formulas free. Like, basically the point being that the women that were around me at that time, we didn't mesh together either. And it's funny how, like, from part 1, it came all the way to part 3, like, how, like, subconsciously, it's crazy how you just continue just bringing all that stuff with you. But, and so it was just like this again, of, why are you doing it this way? And, like, my baby had a hard time sleeping. She still has a hard time, so she wouldn't sleep. And her dad is like that too, just always going. And both my girls got that from him. But one thing that I'm not going to say who it was, because I don't want to put people's business out there, but this family member was like, all right, I'll help you watch as I keep well, if I say that, that'll give away who it is. But, I'll keep the daughter, and I'll keep your daughter while you go back to work. I was like, thank you. Okay. I was very grateful. And it turned out, certain techniques were being used, like giving Tylenol to get them to go to sleep. And I would get off of a long 8 to 10 hour day, and then I would have a baby that's wide awake because she had been asleep all day. And it would, and then certain things like, I would bring books, and I would bring, like, activities and things for them to do with my child. And it turned out my child didn't do anything but sit on the lap and listen to this person gossip and have, what's the word? Soap operas playing. That's pretty much what my kid did. And I wanted my child to have a bond with this person. I guess there's no way really to get around it, because this is the only grandma that my kids have, because my mother passed away a long time ago. So I really wanted this to work, but it didn't, like, it just wasn't like on what I wanted. So, people say, reach out, talk to people. And I was reaching out and I was talking to people, and I was being told, like, you got to do this by yourself. Like, you shouldn't need all this help. And it was hard for me because I did need help. And, one of the, women I spoke with who understood this, she said, you know what, I come from that too. And a lot of women do. A lot of men do too. Like, it's kind of something that's kind of rampant in our community, that the mother-child relationship is very strained. And that's something that I'm working towards. I want to work on healing. That's why, like, I want to work with mothers that are going through this themselves. But anyway, she told me, she said, well, it's a good thing that most of this is instinctual, right? It's all instinct. Not right now. So, and that's exactly right, is that it was instinct. But the thing about it was that my instincts are to nurture. But I had to provide. So it would be one thing where I would be on the phone trying to close a deal, and then I would have my kids fall and scrape their knee. And I would be stuck between, like, do I close the deal and get some money so I can put food in their mouth? Or do I shut off the deal and go nurture a skinned knee? And that is something that a lot of us women are stuck between, because it's like, how do I nurture if I can't provide? And, when I went to their dad and said, okay, and these are things that should have all been worked out before. Granted, I've been called every name in the book for not doing things the way I have. And that's another thing in our community, is that everything is our fault. You're the woman, you laid down with him, you did this, it's all you. Everything that happens to them, and if they're messed up when they grow up, it's your fault. If they're dirty, it's your fault. If their nose is running and you didn't wipe it, it's your fault. Anything that happens to them is your fault. So, and like, men are held to such a low standard. But for me, it's like, I'm a problem solver. So, I went to him and was like, okay, so here's our bills, here's this, here's that. Okay, I need you to do this while I do that. And let's work this out. And he was the type that was like, oh, hell no. Like, you need to go back and get you some more food stamps or something. Why don't you go get on get in the Section 8 line? His response was, why don't you go to, like, these food drives and these food pantries and go to this and go to that? And it's like, I'm coming to you as the man to provide for us, to be there for us. And that's where I say the independent woman thing, this whole feminist thing, is what came back to bite me in my ass. Because it was like, that's why it's important. I learned the hard way why it's important to make sure that a man will pick up his half or his load. It's not even half. It's just, it's even hard to just explain. Sweetheart, please go. Not right now, honey. All right? I'll come out with everything in just a second. Okay, please go sit down. I'm almost done here, okay? And, even situations like this where I'm trying to work and get things done, but I get split. Like, it's so hard. And just being like, okay, I'm going to make dinner. Can you take them to the park? Or, I'm going to do this. Can you do that? I'm going to do, like, that whole back and forth thing was like, nah. And for him, it was like, I already do more than my dad did. Like, my dad I didn't even know from his point of view, was that I didn't even know my dad till I was 13. So, and now he has his own, like, trauma dealing with, fatherhood and everything. So in his mind, it was like, I'm already doing more than my own dad did by just showing my face. What the more else do you want from me? And it, and it got hard because, like, I became very, like, spread very thin, like, just trying to finish up my master's, trying to finish up my license, having to work, having to pay the rent, the bills, the car, the insurance, and then having to be a mother at the end of all that, trying to be loving and open and caring and wanting to have all the things that I wanted. And I wasn't supported in that. It was like, just take a moment to breathe. I know I'm trying to get it all out because you see my kid that keeps coming in and out, and I'm like, let me hurry up and get the story out. Goodness, because I'm going to be interrupted 1,000 more times. But if you're hearing me talk, you see like the jumbled web that everything was. And it got to a point where, like, at one point he did end up cheating on me because I didn't feel good. Like, I didn't have time to really do anything, like to work out. I was trying to pay everything, and just to get help, like on the bills, it would cause a big argument. He was the type that didn't even offer. It wouldn't even be like, he wouldn't even ask, like, how much is rent? Here, let me give you, I don't have much, but let me give you 50, like, just like nothing. Like he straight up, like his answer was, like I said, like, I come home, like, what else do you want from me? And, like, I was the type that wanted like the picket fence, and I wanted like the nice home, and, like the pictures. Like, I'm the type that wants like family pictures hanging in the hallway, and we take trips and we do things, and we have bike rides, and we go to functions together, and that was the family that I wanted. And it was very far from the family that I had. I was just being spread very thin, having to, do it all on my own. And it was like, I was like a mother to him and our daughter. But still, even at this point, I still felt like, well, I just need to be stronger. I just need to be tougher. Like, maybe if I made more money, like once I get through this master's, things will be better and I'll be able to do better for us. But eventually one day, like I said, like, I ended up catching him cheating and threw him out. And even that got blamed on me. Was that, like, being told, like, by the grandma, his mother, all men cheat and whatnot. It's in their nature. And if you aren't paying attention to them, and if you aren't keeping it sexy, and if you aren't, being there, that's what they're going to go do. So I blamed it on myself and said, you know what, I'm sorry. I need to get back in shape. I need to get my stomach together. Let me go start getting waxed up. Let me keep my hair together. Let me do all this stuff. Please come back. And let's just, because I was ashamed of being a single mom. So he came back and things were the same. And everything. I think that, like, we improved, I guess you could say, our consciousness a little bit, like through this time is where, like, I left Christianity and things like that, because I just couldn't take this whole, like, the man is the head and you're the tail and everything. So, and we started getting a little bit more, like, rooted in spirituality. But even then, then we had our second child through all this. And I started my own healing journey. And where are we in the story? I think that that's kind of like where you find me now, is that, I don't want to say it was a mistake, but, it was, everything really was backwards. And now you find me at this place where I'm trying to make sense out of motherhood after everything that I've been through. And, I spent the last few years really working on my self-esteem, really building up my confidence, really, figuring out who I am and, what it is that I want to do. And, just trying to make things work for me and my kids. So yeah, I feel like this is like a natural place to kind of bring it to an end. I really kind of feel like I was just venting, really. And I'll probably have to make another part to this because I've been on here for about 40 minutes. Um, but it's really about, since motherhood is such an important role, and like I keep saying, perhaps this will have to be like, it feels like a good natural stopping place, is that, the society that we live in, the propaganda that we're under, the programming that we're under doesn't support families. It doesn't support relationships. It doesn't support any of that. So that's where you find me now, where I'm trying to figure out a way to carve a space for that, trying to find a way to, support myself as I support others. Because, I see that a lot. And like the women I talk to in the groups that I'm in, is that they talk about how the village is gone. Um, there's no support. And like a lot of us in this generation now are really rejecting a lot of the things that we were told. We're realizing that like a lot of the foods that we're eating aren't good for us. There's like, there's all kinds of things. Like times are really changing. And, it's really tough for women to raise kids by themselves. Um, and that's what I was saying at the beginning of this, was that like I kind of feel slightly exhausted by my story, but it does feel good to get it out. So if you're watching this and you make it through, go ahead, and I'm open to hearing your side and hearing like what you go through, or even connecting with you. I'm building up a healing group of a course that works on this. So if that's something you're interested in, like I said, send me a comment, send me a message. Um, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube under Lady Kendall. Um, yeah, and I think that is all for now. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream here on YouTube.